They say small things tilt bigger lives. 3 sentences will tell you how. A fence post, a plastic notice, and a woman who decided she owned the story of a whole neighborhood. I'm Evan Mercer. I grew up on my family's land in Willow Ridge, and what started as a fence to stop the dog from wandering turned into a months-long test of everything I thought about community and justice. I wasn't looking for trouble. The fence was simple: 4 posts, wire, a gate that swings cleanly when the wind is right. I had the survey, the title, the county plat folded in my glove box like a small, dull Bible. But rules have 2 faces. On one side, they protect. On the other, they give someone a reason to show up and perform authority, even when that authority is made of nothing. Her name was Marla Hargrove. She called herself Community Safety Liaison at Lakeside Commons HOA, which is a title you earn by printing your own stationery. Marla liked meetings, liked cameras, liked the way neighbors looked at her when she spoke. There's a power in being the loudest person in a small room. At first, it was petty things: a notice under my mailbox about cutting common land, a passive-aggressive post in the homeowner's chat. I ignored it. I thought common sense would carry me through. Then things got stranger. One morning, I found the main gate tied with a length of caution tape and a laminated sign. Unsafe structure. There was a tow truck idling across the lane. Someone had taken a photograph of my gate, doctored it with a red circle and arrow, and sent it to half the neighborhood. Doctored photos are a kind of modern arson. Set a small spark and watch gossip burn. We tried talking. Deputy Reyes, who'd been the same steady voice on the other end of 911 for years, came by, not because he liked drama, but because when your mailbox fills with legalese, someone has to read it out loud. Document everything, he told me, like a simple recipe. It felt tedious than paper stacks, timestamps, receipts, but those stacks would become my life raft. Marla escalated in stages that felt almost methodical. She organized safety inspections, people in vests with clipboards. HOA walked my property and left behind official-sounding notices in fonts that made them look legal. Someone cut a panel from my fence at night and left it leaning on a nearby oak. The next morning, a video showed it being removed for safety, and Marla posted it live with commentary sharp and theatrical. Her followers cheered. I felt like a man in a play he never auditioned for. There was a moment, maybe the worst, when I found a small, weatherproof camera tucked beneath my porch, aimed up at my back door. It had been there days, time-stamped, recording. You don't realize how much of a person is built out of private, ordinary moments until those moments are available to strangers. I called Reyes. He bagged the device, labeled it, and told me, "We have to trace the purchase. Whoever bought it may have left a trail." Tracing those purchases felt like detective work, but in a town where everyone thought they knew everyone, the lead went cold at the usual places: cash, favors, friends who wouldn't believe their neighbor capable of such things. Then a receipt surfaced, a small hardware store printout with a name I didn't recognize, and a credit card with a name I did. Marla's husband, a man who rarely said more than good morning. Motive, it turned out, wasn't mystery, it's ego and fear. Fear of anyone who doesn't do things her way, fear of losing the spotlight, and the old territorial itch disguised as civic duty. When the cameras came out, so did the stories. Marla spun a narrative about encroachment, public safety, protecting property values. She told neighbors that anyone who changed the look of the neighborhood threatened their investment. It sounds reasonable if you say it in a courtroom voice. It sounds ugly when you can see the jealousy in the cadence. She resented that my front porch had more sunlight than hers, that kids sometimes played on my lawn. Small slights calcify. I started to keep everything in a binder: photographs, dates, witness names, a log of texts and emails that read like a diary of escalation. The binder made me look obsessive to some, paranoid to others, but the binder also made my story legible. At the community mediation, Marla stood at the table and told the panel she felt unsafe and that I had installed a barrier that divvied up our shared open space. I opened my binder. Time-stamped photos, recorded videos, the camera with serial numbers, certified mail receipts, practical things against theatrical claims. She didn't stop. When legal language failed to sway the board, Marla tried optics, planting a scene, orchestrating a confrontation that would look bad on camera. A neighbor's dog was let loose one afternoon and romped under the gate. Marla happened by with her phone, gasping theatrically, offering a different kind of proof. There was a voicemail later threatening, thinly disguised as concern. "People like you," she said, "think rules don't apply to them." It was meant to sting. At a certain point, the question became not whether she had the moral high ground, but how far she was willing to go to keep it. And legal consequences followed public spectacle. Deputy Reyes, who had seen enough backyard grievances to write a small novella, obtained a warrant after the camera's serial number tied back to the hardware store and a chain of messages that implicated Marla. The execution of that warrant felt cinematic, officials in plain clothes moving quietly, the discovery of more devices, boxes of receipts, a pattern that suddenly read less like coincidence and more like planning. When the DA charged Marla with unlawful surveillance and filing false HOA reports, everything that had been rumored gathered like storm clouds, then burst. The HOA board scrambled, some resigned, others deleted long histories of votes. The neighborhood multiplied into factions, those who believed Marla's performance of victimhood, and those who saw the paper trail and the camera logs and the way power looked when it stripped away civility. What surprised me most wasn't the exposure itself, but the quiet aftermath. There was no marching band, no triumphant speech. The tow truck still idled sometimes, and someone still left a stray notice on my mailbox every now and then like a tiny echo. But evening returned: crickets, soft boats on the reservoir, ordinary things that remind you the world outlives its melodramas. I thought about forgiveness, and it was messy. I don't know that Marla is the kind of person you can forgive in a single afternoon. She was, in court filings, a portrait of envy and compensation, the woman who'd found identity in controlling other people's lives. But there is also the mundane truth that most of us are performing roles, hugging scripts we don't remember picking up. That doesn't excuse what she did. Privacy is a muscle, and she had squeezed it until it bled, but it does complicate the story in ways that make simple judgments feel inadequate. People messaged after the story went viral: neighbors, strangers, someone who had been bullied by a different HOA 5 towns over. Their stories arrived like coals, hot, small, capable of starting fires. I learned that the real power of these fights doesn't live in courtrooms. It lives in binders and timestamps, and in your willingness to document a life that someone else wants to turn into a spectacle. Bureaucracy becomes a shield when you let it. We reformed the HOA rules: real forms, registered notices, a clearer process for inspections. It felt better to replace improvisation with paperwork, like swapping an old reckless driver for a seatbelt. But a rulebook doesn't change hearts. My last scene at the dock, looking over the reservoir as dusk folded its hands, was not vindication. It was a question. What do we owe each other when we live close enough to hear each other's laughter and our resentments? So here's the thing. I could have fought back the other way, mirrored the drama, retaliated in social feeds, stooped to the same performative cruelty. Instead, I chose to make the less glamorous, slower choice. Collect evidence, stay calm, let law do the heavy lifting. It isn't noble, it's boring, and it costs patience. It also works more than you'd think. Now it's your turn. What would you have done in my shoes? Did I do the right thing by putting everything in a binder and filing reports? Or did I allow a bully to get away with too much before the law intervened? Tell me where you stand: justice, revenge, or something in between. If you've seen an HOA spiral out of control, or if you've been on the other side of these conflicts, drop a comment, share your story, and let's talk about what fairness looks like when neighbors mistake power for principle.